No, I'm not a furniture mover. I can, but no, I don't make a habit out of it. I don't know about you, but I find it interesting and a lot of fun to, when I was a teenager, my best friend and I, we would take a trip to the mall this time of year. We'd be there probably, once a week for about 3 or 4 weeks because it's just amazing what you do, what you see. Because it now becomes the mad dash. Next weekend already, it's going to be Black Friday, right? Yeah, or something like that. Anyway, it's coming on us fast, all this stuff. And it's amazing, it's only gotten worse. The speed at which everything comes into play drives us to think of things that aren't things that we need to be thinking on. The material things come into play. But my best friend and I, we enjoyed ourselves. We just wander the mall. And there was a bench that we always liked to sit on. So we'd come over and we'd sit next to each other and we'd just kind of eat our pretzel, drink our pop or whatever. We might lean over and say something to each other. The reason being is that what we were doing was people watching. I love people watching. Because there's so much you can learn about the human psyche, the human nature of people. And we would take moments and we would watch a couple eating in the food court. And he would lean over and say, "So what do you think the conversation is there? She looks kind of irritated with him." And I'd say, "Yep. But I don't know what the conversation is." And then we start making up conversations. And then you see these people, and it always amazed me. In a mall on a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, you don't expect to see people dressed in suits and ties and all their jewelry on, but it happened. And I'm like, so what are they trying to prove? And he said, "I have no idea. But it looks funny." Because you ever seen somebody that has these, either a real nice suit and tie on, and John, you might be able to relate to this. You're trying to eat real fast because you got someplace else to go, or someplace else to be, or that one more thing that you got to get before you can get back. And so you're trying to eat fast, and ketchups and French fries are awesome, but when you're in a suit, it never fails. Maybe it's just me, but it always hits my tie. It always hits my pants. Thankfully, it never hit my white shirt. But anyway, so we would just watch. And I don't know that it isn't part of our nature. I can't honestly tell you that this morning that it isn't part of our makeup, because if we were made in God's image, Christ was a people watcher. A lot of his lessons that he taught his disciples came from sitting on a bench with his disciples, watching people. He speaks to us today the same way. Granted, it's been over 2,000 years ago now, but this idea that we can learn from watching. We can learn about a person's status. We can learn about a person's own thought of themselves. We can learn about all kinds of stuff when we just watch. The thing of it is that sometimes I think we forget that as much as we are watching people, they are watching us. Hey, remember that guy? He told us that he was a Christian. He doesn't look very Christian-like right now, as he's screaming at his wife, getting after his kids in the wrong way. I think that lady over there was one that invited me to some special service, and I went, and it was amazing. But I found out later that she's a tremendous gossip and tells everybody. One of those people, that you got telephone and tell so-and-so. That's the fastest way to get news out. If you want somebody to know something, go tell so-and-so. It'll be out. This passage that we're looking at today speaks specifically about an instance when Christ was people watching with his disciples. Mark chapter 12, starting with verse 38. He's people watching with them. He's showing them and talking with them. And from what I can find out from Scripture and what I see and what I've read from commentators that know more than I do, he was watching silently. Now you can pretty much picture this, I'm pretty sure. Because I don't see Christ as somebody that's talking real loud. He's probably leaning over to his disciples like my friend and I did to each other when we were in the mall. Hey, I want you to pay attention to this. And from what I gathered as I read and studied and I prayed and over this passage, God began to talk to me about the fact that, hey, you know what? People are watching you. People know that you are who you say you are. This is a reminder to all of us to keep ourselves in check. Because as much as we're watching them, they're watching us. Which might be a little bit of a interesting thought. It might be a little scary for some. Oh man, the other day I lost it in Walmart because I couldn't find something, and my kids were pulling on me, my grandkids were trying to get a hold of me. This person I was in such a hurry, and people wouldn't get out of my way. Did they see something that wasn't Christ-like in me at that moment? Christ gives us a pretty specific picture in this passage. Two different pictures. Two different lessons that we may see what we should be and what we shouldn't be. In his teaching, he was saying, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and like respectful greetings in the marketplace and chief seats in the synagogue and places of honor at banquets, who devour widows' houses and are for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive greater condemnation. And he sat down opposite the treasury, and he began to observe how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which amounted to a cent. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury, for they all put in out of their surplus, but she put out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on. The tremendous great lost my thought here. The tremendous difference between these two. The scribes wanted people to see them, so they would stand out on the street corners and pray many, many words and let everybody look at me. They would wear robes that signified who they were. They would make a spectacle of themselves because they wanted everybody to honor them. In another gospel, Christ tells his disciples that, I tell you, they've already received their reward. When we look at the widow, there's something that we all have to understand. They had these goofy-looking offering plates, so to speak. They were brass trumpets that came up out of these boxes. And with the brass, of course, if you throw a lot of change in, man, it's going to make a lot of noise. And guess what? I guarantee you those scribes made sure they had all kinds of coin. Look at me, how much I'm getting. As it rattles in that brass horn down into the box. And here comes this little widow. I'm guessing she wasn't very big at all. I picture somebody about the size of my grandma who was 4'9", hunched over, maybe walking with a little bit of a help with a stick or a cane or whatever they had. She walks up and very discreetly just lets her 2 coins fall in. 2 coins that together only equal 1 cent. Can you imagine? And that's all she had. But that's what she wanted to give. There was no fanfare. There was no elegant dress code. There was no nothing that anybody but Christ would have saw this lady. One of those people that just kind of all of a sudden something's done and you don't know who did it. This is what I'm picturing. Somebody that sees something that needs to be done around the house or around the church or around maybe something else in the community, and all of a sudden it just gets done and nobody knows why or how, or nobody even asks. Nobody probably even realizes. But they just quietly do what they need to do, what they feel God's told them to do. The Pharisees give us a description of the typical hypocrite. More concerned about what they look like, more concerned about how people perceive them. They're ostentatious. They have egos that have been built by years of people saying, well, look at that guy, man. He must know what he's talking about. Look at those robes. You know, some of the best preachers I've ever heard haven't worn a robe, haven't worn a suit. Some of the best preachers I've known, I don't even have a degree or are ordained. But they come and meet you where you're at. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in things, and it's not that we can't dress up nice. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is when we do things, what are we doing them out of? Is it a matter of being ostentatious in what we're projecting to people? Because I guarantee you there are some, and I've ran into them, and maybe you have, that they don't dress in a suit and a tie and a gorgeous evening gown and high heels, but they're just as ostentatious. They're just as ego-driven as those that do. What this is telling me and what this is telling us is that we need to take the example of the widow and run with it. Why? Because people are watching us as much as we're watching them. People need to see the example that Christ set out before his disciples, and it's telling us today, and this holds true into the future. This is what we need to focus on. not on ourselves, because we're no better. Those scribes and Pharisees, and talk about do as I say and not as I do. Not realizing. And I'm not saying that Christ's own disciples didn't miss this, because it's there. But they missed what Scripture was saying. They missed what God was saying. And when Christ came, they missed what He was trying to tell them. It isn't about being served, it's about serving. It isn't about being given things. See, the priests and the scribes and all those people in the synagogue, they weren't paid, but they were taken care of. And yet, they were in the mindset, I believe, as you owe me this. I'll go stand out on a street corner, but you better pay for my supper. I'll teach you what the Torah says, but you better make sure that I got food in my belly for tomorrow. The whole difference between the two is just surprising and amazing to me. Since when is it about what you have that makes you a Christian? Since when does it matter how much you're able to give that makes you a Christian? Since when does it matter what you look like when you come through the doors that makes you a Christian? Because that is not what Christ set up. Look at His disciples, for crying out loud. If you were going to pick a bunch of 12 men to serve with you and upset the world for Christ, would those be the 12 men that you would choose? They were fishermen and tax collectors, cheats. Judas skimmed off the top. They were nobodies. A bunch of misfits.